One peaceful morning, the roar of a powerful engine shattered the silence of a poor neighborhood. A shiny black luxury SUV stopped directly in front of a small, worn-out house. Neighbors peeked through their windows in confusion. Who could they possibly be looking for here, they whispered among themselves. Then the car door opened. Men dressed in expensive suits stepped out and asked only one question. Is this where the waitress named Ajimka lives? Join us as we uncover this powerful story of kindness and an unexpected reward. Ajimka's day always began before sunrise. By 3 a.m. she was already awake. Rain had poured all night long, and once again water dripped steadily from the leaking roof. Quietly, she sat up, placed a bucket beneath the leak, and moved her mat to a dry corner of the room. Then she lay back down and stared at the ceiling. This roof again, she murmured softly. It had become part of her everyday life. Every rainy night brought the same struggle. She had been saving little by little to repair it, but her salary was too small. Still, she kept holding on to one hope. This month, I will finally fix it. By morning, she was already at the roadside restaurant where she worked as a waitress. The place was noisy as usual. Plates hit tables, customers called out loudly, and orders came non-stop. Ajimka, table 3 is waiting, her boss shouted. I'm coming, Ma, she answered quickly. She moved from one table to another carrying plates as fast as she could. That same morning, an old man stood outside the restaurant. In his hand was an empty plastic plate. He remained near the entrance, watching the waitresses move around serving food. His eyes followed each plate carefully, hoping someone would notice him, but no one did. Some customers glanced at him briefly before looking away. Others continued eating as though he did not exist. The old man swallowed hard and tightened his grip on the plate, yet he still refused to leave. Not long after, Madame MacArthur, the owner of the restaurant, stepped outside and noticed him. She was widely known in the area as a harsh and unforgiving woman, especially when it came to protecting her business. The moment she saw the old man standing there, her expression changed immediately. Without saying a word, she grabbed a bowl of cold water and walked quickly toward him. What are you doing here, dirty old man? She snapped angrily. Do you want to scare my customers away? The old man tried to speak, his voice weak and shaky. Please. I just want something to eat. Leave now, she interrupted sharply. Or you will regret ever coming here. The man stood still for a few seconds, his fingers trembling slightly around the plate. It seemed as though he wanted to beg, but the words refused to come out. At that moment, Ajimka stepped out of the kitchen carrying a tray of food. She heard the shouting and turned toward the entrance. Her steps slowed immediately. Before she could fully understand what was happening, Madame Agatha poured the cold water directly over the old man's head. Water streamed down his face and soaked his clothes. The old man lowered his head, his shoulders sinking in silence. Ajimka froze where she stood. Suddenly, the tray in her hands felt heavier than before. For a brief moment, the entire restaurant became quiet. Everyone turned to watch. Some people laughed. Others simply stared. Ajimka felt anger building inside her, but she remained silent. Her fingers tightened around the tray. She wanted to speak up, to say something, anything at all. But she stayed quiet. She knew Madame Agatha too well. One mistake and she would lose her job immediately. As the old man slowly turned to leave, his weak steps dragging across the ground, he paused for a moment. Then he looked back. His eyes met Ajimka's. There was something unusual in that look. Not anger. Not even sadness. It was something deeper, something she could not explain. Ajimka held his gaze, her heart suddenly uneasy. Then he turned away and disappeared down the road. Madame Agatha adjusted her wrapper and calmly returned to her seat as though nothing had happened. "Why are you standing there?" she barked. "Go and serve the food." Ajimka and the other waitresses quickly returned to work, but her mind kept replaying the scene over and over again. That evening after work, Ajimka walked home slowly. Her legs ached from the long day. As she moved along the roadside, she noticed someone sitting nearby. At first, she paid little attention, but after a few steps she slowed down. Something felt familiar. She looked again, this time more carefully. Then she stopped completely. It was him. The same old man from the restaurant earlier that morning. He sat quietly on the pavement still holding his plastic plate. His head was lowered, and he looked even weaker than before. Ajimka stood across the road for a moment. Then she looked away and continued walking, but her steps became slower and slower. Her mind would not rest. She remembered the way he stood silently at the restaurant, the cold water poured over him, and how he never argued or fought back. She tightened her grip on her handbag. Inside was the little money she had left, the same money she planned to use to cook dinner for herself. She walked a little farther. Then she stopped again. Quietly, almost as though she was arguing with herself, she whispered, "If I reduce the ingredients I want to buy for the soup, it will still come out fine." She shook her head. No, things are already difficult. She started walking again, only to stop once more. Closing her eyes briefly, she sighed. But I will receive my salary soon. It won't hurt if I manage for a while. She turned around. This time, her steps were quicker. She had finally made her decision. If I leave him like this, I will not have peace, she said softly. As she approached the place where he had been sitting, she slowed down. Then she stopped. The spot was empty. She looked around carefully. First left. Then right. Where did he go now? She took a few steps forward, stretching her neck to search for him nearby, but the road was already becoming dark. People continued passing by, yet the old man was nowhere to be seen. Ajimka stood there quietly for a moment before letting out a slow breath. God, I hope he finds something to eat tonight. She looked around one final time just to be sure. Nothing. Slowly, she turned and continued her walk home. The next morning, Ajimka arrived at work early as usual. She tied her apron and immediately began working. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. As she carried plates between tables, her thoughts kept returning to the old man, whose name was Akban. The way he stood there. The way he stayed silent. The way he looked at her before leaving. Even when customers spoke to her, she had to force herself to pay attention. "Waitress, my drink," one customer called out. "Yes, sir," she answered quickly, snapping back to reality. She moved faster, trying to keep up with the workload, but deep inside something still felt unsettled. By afternoon, it was finally time for lunch break. The staff usually gathered behind the restaurant during lunch break to eat together. Ajimka stood up slowly. Then suddenly, an idea came to her mind. She turned immediately and walked straight into the kitchen.
The cook, a middle-aged woman, was already serving food into plates. "Ajimka, come and take your food," the woman called out. Ajimka hesitated briefly before speaking. "Please, can you help me pack mine in a takeaway plate?" The cook paused and looked at her carefully. "Takeaway? Why?" Ajimka forced a small smile. "It's just for a personal reason." The cook narrowed her eyes slightly. "You? This girl? What exactly are you planning?" "Nothing, Ma. Please just help me," Ajimka replied softly. The cook shook her head lightly. "All right then." She packed the food and handed it over to her. "Thank you, Ma," Ajimka said quickly. She collected the food, placed it inside a small nylon bag, and quietly stepped out of the kitchen. Her eyes moved around carefully. She walked toward a table close to the exit and bent down as if she was cleaning it. Quietly, she slipped the nylon bag beneath the table. Then she picked up a hand towel and slowly began wiping the surface. But her eyes never stopped moving. She watched. She waited. Customers continued talking quietly at their tables while waitresses moved back and forth carrying plates across the restaurant. Madame Agatha remained seated at her usual spot, watching everything closely as always. Ajimka wiped the table slowly, trying to buy more time. Her heartbeat grew slightly faster. Not now. Not yet, she whispered softly to herself. Then suddenly, who served this food? Madame Agatha's sharp voice echoed through the restaurant. The entire room became quiet. People turned immediately to look. One waitress stood frozen in confusion. Come here, Madame Agatha snapped. At once, everyone's attention shifted toward them. Ajimka froze for a brief second. Then she realized it. This was her opportunity. Without wasting time, she bent quickly, picked up the nylon bag, and stood upright. At first, she walked calmly, then faster, then even faster. Within moments, she was outside the restaurant. The hot afternoon air brushed against her face as she tightened her grip on the nylon bag. I hope he is there today, she murmured quietly. Her pace became quicker. She turned the corner, her eyes searching ahead carefully. She slowed slightly and stretched her neck to look around. Nothing. She moved forward again. Maybe he was just somewhere out of sight. She continued walking while scanning both sides of the road carefully. Still nothing.
When she reached the exact spot where she had seen him the previous day, she stopped completely. He was not there. Ajimka stood still, her shoulders dropping slightly. She looked left. Then right. There was no sign of him. She let out a deep breath. So all this effort was wasted just like that, she said quietly. For a moment, she felt exhausted. Not only physically, but emotionally too. Slowly, she turned around, preparing to leave. Then she paused. Something across the road caught her attention. She narrowed her eyes. Someone was sitting there. She looked again, more carefully this time. Her eyes widened slightly. That's him. Without hesitation, she checked both sides of the road and quickly crossed over. As she got closer, her steps slowed. It was him. Akban. Still holding the same plastic plate. Still looking weak and tired. Ajimka walked toward him gently. Good afternoon, sir, she said softly. The old man looked up. Their eyes met once again. This time, he did not look away. Ajimka stretched out her hand and offered him the nylon bag. Please, take this. Akban looked at the nylon bag and then back at her face. He did not collect it immediately. For me? He asked slowly. Yes, she replied. It's food. Still, he did not take it. Why? He asked. Ajimka blinked in confusion. Why, what? Why are you giving me this? He repeated calmly. Ajimka shifted slightly before answering. I saw what happened yesterday, she said quietly. What my madam did. I felt very bad about it. She paused briefly. But I couldn't say anything. If I had spoken up, I would have lost my job immediately. Akban kept staring at her steadily without reacting. Ajimka continued, speaking a little faster now. This is my lunch, but I'm sure you need it more than I do. I will find a way to manage myself. She stretched the nylon bag closer toward him. Please, just take it. This time, Akban slowly reached out and accepted it, though his eyes remained fixed on her face. You may not eat this afternoon because of this, he said quietly. Ajimka gave a small smile. I will be fine. There was a brief silence between them. Then the old man spoke again. What if helping me brings you trouble? Ajimka looked slightly surprised by the question. She frowned softly before replying. Do not worry about me, she said calmly. Right now, you need to eat. Ukban nodded slowly, as though he was quietly taking note of her words. Ajimka glanced back toward the road.
Suddenly, her eyes widened. I need to go, she said quickly. They will start looking for me. She stepped back once. Then again. Please eat it before it gets cold. Ukban said nothing. He simply watched her quietly. Ajimka turned immediately and hurried away. Her steps fast, almost like she was running. Her heartbeat echoed loudly in her chest. I hope nobody noticed, she muttered under her breath. When she reached the restaurant, she slowed down. She adjusted her expression, took a deep breath, and stepped back inside. The restaurant was still busy with movement and conversation. Customers talked loudly while waitresses moved around carrying trays from table to table. Madame Agatha was still speaking harshly to the waitress from earlier. As Ajimka entered, she straightened her apron and tried to calm her breathing. Then a voice stopped her. Ajimka. She froze immediately. Slowly, she turned around. It was Azuka, one of the waitresses. She stood beside a table with her arms folded and a faint unfriendly smile across her face. Azuka stared at Ajimka for a moment before lowering her eyes to Ajimka's empty hands. Where are you coming from? She asked. Ajimka hesitated briefly. Nowhere, she answered quietly. Azuka stepped slightly closer. Nowhere? She repeated calmly, though her tone carried something firm underneath. I saw you leave with a nylon bag during the break, she said. She paused briefly before speaking again. So, where is it now? Azuka kept her eyes fixed directly on Ajimka's face. Then she lowered her voice slightly. You should remember something. Ajimka. She leaned closer. There was a long silence before she continued. Just so you know, I have my eyes on you. Ajimka remained silent. She simply stood there without responding. Any small mistake you make, I will make sure you suffer for it, Azuka added coldly. For a moment, Ajimka felt a heaviness in her chest, but she refused to show it on her face. Silence passed between them once again. Then Azuka stepped back casually, picked up a tray, and walked away as though nothing had happened. Azuka had never liked Ajimka. From the very beginning, there was something about Ajimka that irritated her. Ajimka was always praised for her hard work. Customers liked her. They smiled whenever she served them. Some even gave her extra tips. That used to be Azuka. She had once been the waitress everyone noticed. The one customers preferred.
But ever since Ajimka started working at the restaurant, things had changed. Now, Azuka felt pushed aside. And she hated it. Deep down, she resented Ajimka for taking away the attention she once enjoyed. Ajimka stood there quietly for a moment. Then she picked up her tray and returned to work. She decided not to think too much about what had just happened. More than anything, she was simply relieved that nobody had caught her giving food to the old man. Later that night, after Ajimka returned home, her body felt exhausted from the long day at work. The small room was quiet. As she sat down on her mat, she suddenly heard something. A low rumbling sound echoed from the sky. She paused immediately. Then she slowly looked up toward the ceiling. Another sound followed, louder this time. Rumble. Ajimka closed her eyes briefly. No, she whispered softly. Her heart sank. She already knew what was coming. Not long after, the rain began. At first, it fell lightly. Then it became heavier. Then louder. Within minutes, water started leaking through the roof again. Ajinka stood up quickly. Not today, she whispered under her breath. She rushed toward the leaking spots and placed bowls beneath them so the water could drip inside. But water kept entering from different parts of the roof. Finally, she sat back down on her mat and let out a deep sigh. Once I get paid at the end of this month, I will add it to the money I've already saved and fix this roof. I will fix everything. All these leaks must stop. Then suddenly, she heard another sound behind her. She turned immediately. Her eyes widened. Water had started dripping directly onto her mat. Quickly, she bent down and dragged the mat to another corner of the room where there was no leakage. Then she stood quietly in the middle of the room, looking around at the bowls scattered everywhere and the water spreading across the floor. The situation frustrated her deeply. The next morning at the restaurant, everything began like any normal day. Noise. Movement. Customers placing orders non-stop. Ajinka worked quietly as usual. When lunch break came again, she walked into the kitchen. The cook was already serving food to the workers. Ajinka, come and take your food, the cook said. Ajinka stepped closer and lowered her voice. Please, Ma, can you serve mine in a takeaway plate? The cook stopped and stared at her. Again, she asked. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You did the same thing yesterday. Why? Ajinka forced a small smile. It's just something personal, Ma. The cook sighed softly. All right then. She packed the food into a takeaway plate and handed it over. Thank you, Ma, Ajinka replied quickly. She collected it and walked away. As usual, Ajinka placed the food inside a nylon bag and waited until everyone became distracted before quietly leaving the restaurant. Outside, the afternoon sun was hot. Ajinka walked quickly while searching ahead with her eyes. As she approached the usual spot, she saw Akban. But something was wrong. He was not sitting upright like before. His body looked weaker. His head hung low. Ajinka hurried closer. Good afternoon, sir, she said gently. Akban slowly lifted his head. Good afternoon, he replied weakly. Ajinka frowned immediately. Are you okay? She asked. He slowly shook his head. I'm not feeling well, my daughter. Her expression changed instantly. What is wrong? She asked with concern. Akban sighed weakly. My body feels hot. I feel very weak. Ajinka quickly handed him the food. Please eat this first. He collected it slowly. Thank you, my daughter, he said quietly. Ajinka watched him carefully for a moment before asking another question. Have you taken any medicine? Akban shook his head. No. I don't have money for that. Ajinka became quiet. She fell into deep thought. Then she looked at him again. How long have you been feeling like this? She asked. Since this morning, he replied softly. Ajinka pressed her lips together. This is not good, she murmured. She remained there thinking for a moment before speaking again. Don't worry. I will try to see what I can do. Akban looked at her silently without saying anything. Ajinka turned and slowly started walking back toward the restaurant. Her steps were slower this time. Her mind felt heavy. The only money I have, she thought, is the money I've been saving to fix my roof. Immediately, she remembered the previous night. The rain. The leaking roof. The bowls scattered across the floor. If I touch that money, I definitely won't be able to fix the roof this month. She paused briefly. Then another thought entered her mind. But if I don't help him, she glanced back slightly. His condition may become worse. Ajinka closed her eyes briefly as she continued walking. Back at the restaurant, she picked up a tray and resumed serving customers. Your food, sir. Thank you, Ma. But mentally, she was somewhere else entirely. I have to do something, she said silently to herself. I cannot leave him like that. After some time, she walked toward Madame Agatha. Ma, she called respectfully. Madame Agatha looked up. What is it? Ajimka had come to ask for permission to leave work before 5 p.m. She carefully gave a believable excuse, hoping Madame Agatha would agree. Madame Agatha asked her a few questions and watched her closely while she answered. After listening carefully, she finally nodded. All right, she said. You can go. Ajimka thanked her quickly and left without wasting any time. She hurried back to where Akban was sitting. Sir, she called gently. He looked up at her. I want to take you somewhere, she said. Can you stand? Akban tried to rise, but he struggled immediately. Ajimka quickly held his arm. Slowly. I'm here. Step by step, she supported him as they walked together toward a small pharmacy nearby. Inside, the pharmacist looked at them. What is the problem? He asked. Ajimka spoke immediately. He is not feeling well. Please check him. The pharmacist nodded. After checking him briefly, his expression became serious. He has a fever, he said. Ajimka's heart sank immediately. I'll prescribe some medication for him, and he should recover soon, the pharmacist added. How much will it cost? She asked. The pharmacist mentioned the amount. Ajimka fell silent. It was expensive. Slowly, she reached into her bag and brought out her debit card, the same money she had been saving to repair her leaking roof. She stood quietly for a moment before handing over the card. Not long after, the pharmacist returned with the medicine. After attending to Akban, he stepped back and nodded. He will be fine, he said. Ajimka nodded in relief. Okay, sir. Thank you. She turned toward Akban and helped him stand up. Step by step, she guided him out of the pharmacy. As they walked, Akban looked at her. Where did you get this money? He asked quietly. Ajimka glanced at him. I have been saving, she replied. For my leaking roof. Akban frowned slightly. Then why spend it on me? Ajimka took a small breath before answering. Because I cannot stand by and watch something bad happen to you. Silence followed. Akban stared at her for a long moment before speaking again. Thank you. You are very kind, my daughter. His voice remained low and calm. But this is too much. Ajimka shook her head gently. It's fine. After helping him back to his usual spot, she slowly stood up. I have to go now, she said. Please remember to take your medicine. Akban nodded. I will. Thank you once again. Ajimka gave a small nod before turning to leave. Behind her, Akban watched her silently. His eyes looked deep in thought, as though something far beyond that moment was on his mind. Without realizing it, Ajimka had just made a decision that would soon change her life forever. The following day, during lunch break, Ajimka once again carried her takeaway food carefully. She looked around to make sure no one was paying attention. Then she quietly slipped out of the restaurant. I'll be quick, she told herself. She walked fast, her thoughts focused completely on Akban. But unknown to her, Azuka had been watching the entire time. From inside the restaurant, Azuka saw Ajimka leave. She waited for a few seconds before quietly following behind from a distance. She stayed hidden behind walls and trees, making sure Ajimka would not notice her. Soon, Ajimka reached the familiar spot. Akban was there, still looking weak as he sat quietly. She hurried toward him. Good afternoon, sir, she greeted warmly. Akban looked up. Good afternoon, my daughter, he replied. His voice sounded better than the previous day, though he still appeared weak. Ajimka smiled slightly. You look better today, she said. He nodded slowly. Yes. I'm feeling a little stronger now. All thanks to you. Ajimka gently shook her head. No, sir. God is the greatest healer, and he alone deserves the praise. Akban looked down at the food in her hand. You brought food again? Yes, she replied softly. Please eat. He accepted it slowly. Thank you. What would I have done without you, my daughter? Not far from them, Azuka hid quietly behind a wall. Carefully, she raised her phone. Her hand remained steady as she snapped several pictures of Ajimka with the elderly man. She captured the exact moment Ajimka handed the food to him. A small smile appeared on Azuka's face. Ajimka, you're finished, she whispered quietly. She did not stay long afterward. Instead, she turned and hurried back toward the restaurant. A few moments later, Ajimka checked her wristwatch. I need to go now, she said. Akban nodded slowly. Thank you again. Ajimka smiled lightly before leaving. When she returned to the restaurant, she picked up a table napkin and was about to begin cleaning a nearby table when someone suddenly stepped close to her. It was Azuka. Her face looked calm. She leaned closer and spoke in a low voice. I have finally discovered your secret. Ajimka froze immediately. What secret are you talking about? She asked carefully. Without saying a word, Azuka slowly opened her phone and showed her the pictures. Ajimka's eyes widened slightly. But she remained silent. Azuka leaned closer again. So, the same man Madame Agatha chased away, she began quietly. Is the same man you've been secretly feeding with her food, right? Fear immediately gripped Ajimka. Azuka continued speaking. So, you are trying to prove that you are better than Madame Agatha? Ajimka quickly shook her head. No, it's not like that. Azuka smiled faintly. Oh really? Then she added calmly, I will tell her everything. Ajimka quickly reached for her hand. Please, Azuka, don't do this. Her voice was low, almost pleading. I'm only helping him. That's all. Azuka tilted her head slightly, a mischievous smile appearing on her face. She looked directly at Ajimka. This little help of yours, she said slowly, is going to cost you your job. Ajimka's eyes widened immediately. Azuka continued speaking while smiling. So, you had better start thinking about how to help yourself now. Her tone carried mockery, as though she was enjoying every moment of it. Then she turned around completely and walked away without looking back. Ajimka remained standing there. Her heart sank heavily. She already knew trouble was coming. That evening after work, she quietly walked home. Her mind was restless. She kept thinking to herself, if Madame Agatha finds out, I'm finished. That night, she barely slept. The next morning, she arrived early at the restaurant. She was about to collect her apron when suddenly, Ajimka. A loud voice stopped her. Slowly, she turned around. It was Madame Agatha. Her face looked hard, and her eyes were sharp with anger. So, you think you are better than me? She asked coldly. Ajimka froze instantly. She glanced around and noticed the other workers staring. Madame Agatha stepped forward. You are the kind one, and I am the wicked one, right? She asked loudly. She moved even closer, her eyes fixed on Ajimka. The same man I chased away from my restaurant, she pointed sharply at her. Is the same man you are secretly feeding with my food? Her voice became harsher with every word. Ajimka quickly shook her head. No, Ma. It's not like that. Madame Agatha laughed bitterly. Not like that? Then she pointed at her again. Come to think of it, the food you are sharing is still my food. Ajimka trembled slightly as she pleaded. Ma, please, it was my lunch. Madame Agatha cut her off immediately. Your lunch? She shouted. Does that lunch not come from my kitchen? Silence filled the restaurant. Only Madame Agatha's voice could be heard. She took another step closer. Before I open and close my eyes, I want you out of this place. Ajimka immediately dropped to her knees. Ma, please. I'm sorry. I did not mean any disrespect. But Madame Agatha refused to listen. Her face remained cold and unforgiving. Then she turned her head toward Azuka. Azuka stepped forward quickly. Yes, Ma. Madame Agatha pointed toward the kitchen. Go and bring me a bucket of water. Her voice was firm. The entire restaurant became quiet once again. Even the customers stopped eating. Nobody spoke. Azuka immediately turned and hurried into the kitchen. Ajimka looked up in panic. Ma, please, she begged again, her voice shaking. I'm begging you. Madame Agatha raised her hand sharply. Shut up. Her voice sounded cold. I will count from 1 to 5. Her eyes remained fixed on Ajimka. If you are still here when I finish counting, she paused briefly before turning slightly toward Azuka. Bring the water. Azuka returned carrying a bucket filled with water. The moment Ajimka saw it, her eyes widened. She immediately moved backward slightly, grabbed her bag quickly, and ran out of the restaurant. That was how Ajimka lost her job. Quietly, she walked back home. No salary. No work. And the hope of fixing her leaking roof was gone. Her eyes were red, but she refused to cry. She simply lay alone in her room in silence. Later that afternoon, she slowly stood up. Then suddenly, her thoughts returned to Akban. She remembered his weak condition and how he had said he had no money for medicine. What if he has not eaten, she whispered quietly to herself. She entered the small kitchen area and cooked a little pot of rice. When it was ready, she served herself a small portion on a plate. After eating only a few spoonfuls, she packed the remaining rice into a takeaway container. Then she headed toward the usual place. But when she arrived, Akban was not there. She looked around carefully and scanned across the road. There was no sign of him anywhere. Nearby, she noticed a locked shop with a bench in front of it, so she sat down to wait, hoping he would appear. Still, there was no sign of him. After waiting for almost 10 minutes, she slowly stood up. Where did he go? She wondered quietly. As she walked home, her mind was troubled. I hope his condition hasn't become worse. I hope nothing bad happened to him. Over the next few days, Ajimka continued moving around searching for another job. Her roof still leaked whenever it rained. Her savings were almost gone. But she kept trying. Then one morning, a shiny black SUV stopped directly in front of Madame Agatha's restaurant. Two men dressed in black suits stepped out of the vehicle. They looked serious. Without wasting time, they walked straight into the restaurant. Customers turned immediately to look at them. One of the waitresses approached politely. Yes, sir. What would you like to eat? She asked. The men spoke calmly. Is this where a lady named Ajimka works? The waitress hesitated briefly before answering. She used to work here, but she was fired recently. The men exchanged quick glances. Then one of them asked, do you know where we can find her? The waitress shook her head. No, I don't. She paused briefly. But I think someone here may know. Quickly, she ran into the kitchen. Ma, she called out. The cook turned toward her. What is it? There are two men outside asking about Ajimka. The cook frowned immediately. Ajimka? What for? They didn't say. The cook paused briefly. Then she walked out to meet them. Outside the restaurant, the cook looked at the two men carefully. Why are you looking for Ajimka? She asked. One of the men answered calmly. Our boss wants to see her. The cook narrowed her eyes. Who is your boss? She asked. Did she do something wrong? The man shook his head immediately. No. She actually helped him. She did him a favor, and he wants to repay her. The cook became quiet for a moment. Then she spoke slowly. I know where she lives. She gave them Ajimka's address. The men nodded politely. Thank you. Then they turned around and walked back to their vehicle. Moments later, the SUV drove away. The next morning, around 11 a.m., the same luxury SUV stopped in front of Ajimka's compound. The same two men stepped out once again and walked into the compound. A neighbor noticed them immediately. Who are you looking for? The neighbor asked. We are looking for Ajimka, one of the men replied. She went out this morning, the neighbor answered. Just then, Ajimka walked into the compound carrying a small bag in her hand. The neighbor pointed toward her. That is her. The men immediately walked closer. Good morning, one of them greeted politely. Ajimka stopped walking. Good morning, she replied carefully. Our boss would like to see you, the man said. Ajimka frowned slightly. Who is your boss? She asked. The men exchanged quick glances. Then one of them brought out an envelope and handed it to her. Ajimka opened it and began to read. It was an invitation to a palace. She looked at the vehicle again and noticed the letters, HR, on the license plate. Her heart skipped slightly. I hope I'm not in trouble, she asked cautiously. No, the men replied immediately. Then they showed her their identification cards and explained that they were private security officers. After hearing that, Ajimka agreed to go with them. She went inside her room and changed into another set of clothes. A few moments later, she stepped outside again, ready to leave with them. Her neighbor looked at her with concern. Don't hesitate to call or notify me if you notice any problem. Ajimka nodded with a small smile. I will, she replied before stepping into the SUV. Moments later, the vehicle pulled away. The journey to their destination was long. They had been driving for more than 4 hours. Throughout the trip, Ajimka kept looking out through the window while her mind raced with questions about what all of this could mean. Finally, the SUV slowed down in front of a huge towering gate. 4 heavily equipped security guards stood outside on watch. One of them stepped forward immediately and opened the gate. The SUV drove inside. Ajimka looked out the window, and her eyes widened in surprise. Large buildings. Beautiful gardens. The entire place looked like a palace. Eventually, the SUV came to a stop. The men stepped out, and one of them opened the door for Ajimka. She slowly stepped out of the car and looked around carefully. The person who wants to see you is inside, one of the men told her. They led her into the building. Soon, they entered a large and beautifully furnished throne room. Then suddenly, Ajimka stopped walking. Her eyes widened in shock. Someone was seated on the throne. She looked carefully again. Her heartbeat slowed. It was Akban. But not the weak man she once knew. Not the poor-looking elderly man she used to meet by the roadside. He looked completely different now. Clean. Strong. Royal. Akban slowly stood up with a soft smile on his face. My daughter, welcome, he said warmly. Ajimka stepped back slightly. Her voice came out slowly. What is going on here? Akban gestured toward a nearby couch. Please sit down. Let me explain everything to you. Ajimka sat down quietly. Her heart felt heavy, and her mind was full of questions. She kept looking at him carefully, uncertain about what she was about to hear. Mr. Akban sat down across from her. For a few seconds, he remained silent before finally speaking. I did not mean to deceive you, he said calmly, but I had to pretend to be a poor man for a reason. Ajimka kept staring at him, confused by what he was saying. Akban continued. I am getting old. One day, I will leave this throne. He paused briefly. My only son, the heir to this throne, has just completed his studies abroad. He will soon return to this community. Ajimka listened carefully. Akban's voice became more serious. But there is a problem. He sighed softly before continuing. My son has never brought a good woman to me. Every woman I have seen around him only wanted the throne, the wealth, and the influence. He shook his head slowly. I do not believe any of them would make a good queen for my son or for the people of this community when he eventually becomes king. Then he paused once more. So, I decided to do something. I disguised myself as a poor man, the king said calmly. I traveled through nearby towns to see how people would treat me. I wanted to find a kind woman. A good woman. A woman who could look beyond wealth and material things. Someone willing to make sacrifices without expecting anything in return, because true leadership requires sacrifice. He looked directly at Ajimka. But I found no one, until I met you. Ajimka remained silent. King Akban continued speaking. You helped me when you believed I had nothing. You gave me food. You even spent the money you had saved to repair your leaking roof just to help a sick old man you believed could never repay you. He paused briefly. You did not know who I truly was, yet you still chose to help me. Another moment of silence followed before he continued. That was when I knew I had found the person I was searching for. Finally, Ajimka spoke quietly. So, all this time, you were never a poor man? Akban gently shook his head. No. I am the king of this land. Ajimka leaned back slightly, still trying to process everything she had heard. I am just a simple woman, she said softly. I grew up without parents. I never had the chance to attend higher education, and I do not look anything like royalty. Then she paused briefly before continuing. Did you ever consider that your son and I may not be compatible? I suppose he does not even know about this arrangement. He may not like me, and I may not like him either. Akban smiled slightly. No, he replied calmly. Even if you do not accept my son, I will leave the rest for God to decide. Then he added gently, but I will still make sure you are well taken care of. He looked at her for a few seconds before speaking again. My investigations showed me that your parents died when you were still very young. His voice softened. If things do not work out between you and my son, then, with your permission, I would like to adopt you. Ajimka stayed silent as the king continued. You will live in this palace as the daughter I never had. He paused briefly. And you will never struggle again. Immediately, Ajimka slid down from the couch and knelt before him. Thank you, my king. King Akban quickly reached out and held her. Stand up, he said warmly. Your kind heart and sacrifice earned you this. Ajimka slowly stood up again. Her eyes were filled with tears. Thank you so much, my king, she said once more. King Akban smiled gently. Just continue being a good person, he replied. That is all I ask. Then he looked around the throne room thoughtfully before speaking again. I want you to settle here from now on. Ajimka nodded while smiling through her tears. King Akban clapped his hands. Almost immediately, several maids entered the throne room and bowed respectfully. Take her to one of the rooms and help her freshen up, he instructed. The maids bowed again. Yes, your majesty. As Ajimka followed them out of the throne room, she turned back one last time. King Akban was still watching her with a calm smile. But deep inside Ajimka's heart, one important question remained. What kind of life had just opened before her? And what would happen when the king's son finally returned? Days passed slowly inside the palace. Ajimka was still adjusting to her new life and the royal clothing she now wore daily. The king had instructed some maids and palace guards to accompany her to the market so she could buy the items needed to adapt to palace life. At first, everything felt strange to her. The large rooms. The maids. The guards. The luxury around her. But little by little, she slowly began getting used to it. Then one morning, King Akban sent for her. When Ajimka entered the throne room, the king looked at her calmly. Ajimka, he called. She stepped forward respectfully. Good morning, your highness, she greeted while bowing slightly. Then King Akban spoke. My son will return to the palace tomorrow. Ajimka blinked softly. The prince, she asked quietly. King Akban nodded. Yes. Ajimka bowed again. Okay, my king. But deep inside, she felt nervous. The next morning, the palace was filled with activity. Drums echoed through the compound. The king had organized a grand royal welcome for his son. Dancers performed proudly. People sang joyfully. Everyone gathered beneath the large canopy inside the palace compound, waiting for the prince's arrival. Then finally, a black car entered the compound. The door opened slowly. A young man stepped out. Tall. Calm. Well-dressed. Immediately, the crowd bowed respectfully. The drums became louder. The prince walked forward until he reached his father. Then he bowed respectfully. Welcome back, my son, King Akban said with a smile. Thank you, father, the prince replied. Then King Akban turned toward Ajimka, who was seated beside him. This is Ajimka, he said. And this is my son, Prince Ikena. Ajimka stood up and bowed slightly in greeting. Good morning, Prince Ikena. The prince looked at her calmly. Good morning, he replied. After the welcome ceremony ended, everyone moved together into the palace. Inside the throne room, they all took their seats. King Akban turned to Prince Ikena. How was your journey? He asked. It was fine, Ikena replied. I hope you were not stressed. No, father. King Akban was clearly trying to reconnect with his son after being apart for 4 years. That evening during dinner, King Akban cleared his throat and looked at Ikena. My son, there is something I need to tell you, he said. Prince Ikena paused and looked at him while wiping his mouth with a napkin. King Akban continued. The lady you met earlier is not like the others. I tested her. Ikena frowned slightly. You tested her? The king nodded. Yes. He then explained everything. How Ajimka had helped him when he disguised himself as a poor man. How she gave him food. How she repeatedly sacrificed her own lunch to help him. And how she even cared for him when he was sick. Ikena listened quietly as the story unfolded. That is why I brought her here, the king said. I want you to get to know her. He paused briefly. I am not forcing her on you, and I am not forcing you on her. Your position as the next king after my reign is a great responsibility. You need a good woman beside you to support you in carrying it. King Akban's expression softened as memories of his late wife came to mind. Your mother, the late queen, he said slowly, was a good and intelligent woman. She stood by me when I became king at a young age. His voice grew heavier for a moment. Everything I have achieved today is because I had a woman like your mother beside me. He looked directly at Ikena. That is why I took it upon myself to find you a woman who has the qualities of a true queen. Someone who can stand with you, support you, and build with you, just as your mother did for me. Ikena lowered his gaze for a moment. Then he spoke. Father, you really did all this? King Akban nodded. Yes. Silence filled the room. Ikena sighed softly. All right. I will get to know her. King Akban smiled slightly. That is all I ask. One evening, Ajimka was sitting alone in the palace garden when Prince Ikena walked up to her. She greeted him politely. Can I sit with you? He asked. Yes, my prince, she replied. For a moment, there was silence between them. Then Ikenna turned to her. So, where are you from? He asked. From a small town nearby, she said, mentioning the name of her community. Ikenna nodded gently. And how was life before you came here? He asked. Ajimka took a small breath. It was quite difficult, she said. Ikenna did not respond immediately. He studied her expression for a moment. Then he said, My father told me how you both met. Why did you help someone you did not even know? Ajimka looked at him, slightly surprised by the question. I just couldn't ignore him, she replied. She paused, then continued. The first time he came to the restaurant where I worked, my madam humiliated him because he was begging for food. I lost my parents at a young age, so I understand what hunger feels like. I know what it means to be hungry and hopeless. If I were in his place, I would want someone to help me too. Ikenna watched her closely. Then he nodded. I see. Slowly, the tension between them began to ease. They started talking more. At first, it was just simple questions and short answers. Then came the smiles, soft and hesitant at first, but genuine. King Agona observed them in silence, and at times, even he found himself smiling quietly. Days passed, then weeks, and Ikenna and Ajimka gradually grew closer. It began with simple greetings like, good morning, and good evening, but soon their conversations expanded. Before long, they were speaking for hours, completely losing track of time. One evening, Prince Ikenna went to his father. Calmly and with certainty, he explained that he had come to admire Ajimka and realized he had developed genuine feelings for her. He expressed his desire to speak with her privately to understand her feelings. If she felt the same, he intended to proceed with formal marriage arrangements. King Agona listened carefully, and a deep sense of happiness filled him. He encouraged his son to follow his heart and speak to her honestly. Shortly after, Ikenna approached Ajimka and shared his thoughts with sincerity. Ajimka listened in silence, then smiled. She felt the same way. When King Agona received the news, he did not delay. Filled with joy, he announced the upcoming marriage ceremony of his son, the prince. Soon after, the palace preparations began once again, this time not for a return, but for a union that would mark the beginning of a new chapter. And so the story comes to a gentle conclusion. Ikenna's journey reminds us that true kindness does not go unnoticed. Even when it feels like no one is paying attention, every good action eventually finds its reward. A sincere heart, real compassion, and the willingness to help others, especially in difficult moments, can open doors we never expected. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness brought unexpected blessings? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Another inspiring story will be coming soon, so make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and share it with others, it truly helps the channel grow. Thank you for watching. Then came the smiles. Soft, hesitant at first, but real. King Agona watched them quietly. Sometimes he found himself smiling. Days passed. Then weeks, Ikenna and Ajimka grew closer with each passing day.
It continued with simple greetings. Good morning, good evening. Then the conversations became longer. And before long they found themselves talking for hours, losing track of time. One evening, Prince Ikenna approached his father. He spoke calmly but with certainty, telling his father that he had grown to admire Ajima and believed he truly liked her. He said he wanted to speak with her privately and find out how she felt. If she felt the same way about him, he intended to move forward with marriage arrangements. King Agona listened and a deep sense of joy filled his heart. He encouraged his son to follow his heart and speak to her. Not long after, Ikenna approached Ajimka. He shared his thoughts with her honestly. Ajimka listened quietly. then smiled. She felt the same. When King Agora heard the news, he wasted no time. With great happiness, he announced the marriage ceremony of his son, the prince. And so the palace prepared once again. This time, not for a return, but for a union that would mark the beginning of a new chapter. And so the story comes to a beautiful end. Aika's journey reminds us that true kindness never goes unnoticed, even when it feels like no one is watching. Every good deed has a way of finding its reward. A pure heart, genuine compassion, and the willingness to help others, especially in difficult times, can open doors we never imagined. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced a moment where kindness brought unexpected blessings? I would truly love to read your thoughts in the comments section. Another interesting and inspiring story will be coming your way in just a few days. So, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it when it drops. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for watching.